While sitting at the table, having a coffee, Stephanie watched Eric's face, the features she knew so well after 15 years of marriage. At 45, her husband maintained the same charm that had won her over on that distant first meeting at the advertising company's office where they both worked. At that time, Stephanie was known for her contagious laughter that echoed through the halls. Her reddish-brown hair framed a face that exuded confidence, and she walked as if the world were her personal stage. Her colleagues admired her not only for her lively appearance, but for the way she managed to turn tedious meetings into productive and lively sessions. Eric, with his always elegant posture and keen eyes, was the strategist who captivated clients with his eloquence. When they met, it was as if two stars had entered each other's orbit. Her creative energy perfectly complemented his charming pragmatism. "You are like a hurricane," he had told her at their first dinner. "A hurricane with which I want to dance for the rest of my life." In the early years, they were inseparable. Dinners at their home became legendary among friends. The cozy apartment overlooking the city park transformed into a hub of laughter and conversations that carried on late into the night. Stephanie cooked elaborate dishes while Eric served carefully selected wines, and together they created an atmosphere that made everyone feel special. Time passed like a pleasant melody until the moment came when they both decided to expand that love into a family. It seemed so natural, so obvious, the next measure in the music they shared. But nature has its own plans. The diagnosis of hormonal imbalance came like an unexpected storm on a picnic day. Stephanie remembered vividly the doctor's office, with its diplomas on the wall and the compassionate expression while explaining the low chances of a natural pregnancy. What followed were 3 years of attempts, needles, injected hormones, and hopes that rose and fell like an emotional roller coaster. Eric was by her side at every stage, holding her hand in waiting rooms, wiping away her tears after each negative result, whispering words of encouragement when discouragement consumed her. When the test finally came back positive, they cried together in the bathroom, embraced like two castaways who had sighted land. Weeks later, the ultrasound revealed not one, but 2 tiny lives pulsing inside her. Twins. The universe seemed to be making up for the wait by doubling its blessing. "I'm going to be surrounded by 3 wonderful women," Eric declared with tear-filled eyes, kissing her already slightly rounded belly. "I'm the luckiest man in the world." However, the twin pregnancy was not kind to Stephanie's body. She gained almost 30 kilos, developed deep stretch marks, and after the complicated delivery, her doctor explained that her body had undergone permanent changes. The diets that used to work easily now seemed ineffective, and time for exercise was scarce with 2 newborns demanding constant attention. Gradually, Stephanie noticed subtle changes in Eric's behaviour. At first, it was furtive glances at her body when she got out of the shower. Then, suggestions of diets that a colleague at work was doing with great results. Invitations to social events began arriving late, as if they were last-minute reminders, when in fact, she later discovered, they had been received weeks in advance. The apartment that once hosted lively parties now rarely received visitors. The photos of the couple on Eric's social media, once so frequent, became scarce, replaced by images of the twins or landscapes. "It will just be a quick work meeting, dear," became the phrase she heard most. "It's not worth exhausting yourself to go. Stay with the girls." Sophia and Emma, the twins, now 4 years old, were the light that kept Stephanie moving forward. Intelligent and affectionate, they had their mother's vivacity combined with their father's cleverness. On an ordinary Wednesday, while organising the shared wardrobe, she found an elegant invitation hidden among Eric's shirts. It was for the company's annual event scheduled for that Friday. She remembered to ask him about it, but the response was quick and rehearsed. "It's just a formal dinner for employees, nothing important. I'll be back early." Stephanie nodded, already accustomed to the exclusion. In the back of her mind, a small voice whispered that he was ashamed of her, that he didn't want to introduce his awkward wife to the elegant colleagues and the slim wives who attended such events. But she silenced that voice, refusing to believe that the man who had held her hand during those difficult fertility treatments would now hide her as an inconvenient secret. On Thursday night, her phone buzzed with a message from Caroline, the wife of one of the company's directors and an old friend. "Steph, which dress are you going to wear to the party tomorrow? We can plan to go together if you want. Marcus is in a meeting out of town and will go straight to the event." Stephanie felt her stomach drop. Her heart raced as she reread the message 3-4 times. It wasn't just for employees. It was an event for couples. And Eric had directly lied to her. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her trembling hands, and replied casually, "Actually, Eric told me it was for employees only. Are you sure the wives were invited?" The response came almost instantly. "Of course, all the wives are going. Laura even bought a new dress especially for the occasion. Eric must have gotten confused. I can pick you up at 7 p.m. What do you think?" That night, Stephanie could hardly sleep. With each passing minute, the wound of exclusion deepened. It wasn't just an event. It was the symbol of something greater, something that had been building for years. In the morning, she looked at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. The still beautiful face, but with expression lines that didn't exist before. A fuller figure, marked by motherhood. Was it really that terrible to appear by his side? A silent determination grew within her. She called her mother, who promptly agreed to stay with the girls. She opened the back of the wardrobe and found a beautiful dress she had bought years ago and never worn, one of the few that still fit her well. The fabric embraced her curves elegantly, without trying to hide her body but celebrating it. At 7 p.m., when the doorbell rang, Eric had already gone straight from work to the event, unaware of his wife's plans. Caroline smiled upon seeing her and whistled in approval. "You look absolutely stunning, Stephanie. Eric is going to be blown away when he sees you." "That's the idea," she replied with a restrained smile. The hotel event hall was impressive, with crystal chandeliers and elegant floral arrangements on each table. Stephanie felt butterflies in her stomach as she entered. It was like returning to a world she had left behind, a world that now seemed to belong only to Eric. She spotted him immediately. In the center of a group, animatedly gesturing with a glass of champagne in hand, Eric displayed that smile she knew so well. Stephanie felt a pang in her chest, but maintained her upright posture as she walked toward him. The first to notice her was David, an old colleague who had always been kind to her. His eyes widened in surprise and pleasure. "Stephanie! My God, it's been so long!" he exclaimed, opening his arms for a warm hug. It was as if a switch had been flipped. Excited voices greeted her, people approached, questions about the twins arose from all sides. In the midst of the commotion, she found Eric's eyes, frozen in an expression of absolute shock. "Surprise, darling," she said, leaning in to kiss his cheek. "I found out there was a little misunderstanding about the invitation." His face visibly paled. "Stephanie, I wasn't expecting to see you here." "Clearly," she replied, maintaining the social smile, though her eyes conveyed a completely different message. The blonde woman next to him seemed to wither slightly in Stephanie's presence. "You must be Eric's famous wife. He talks about you so much," she said, extending her hand. "Really? How curious." Stephanie shook her hand firmly. "Because he barely mentioned that this event would take place." The discomfort was palpable. But before the situation could become even more tense, the company's marketing director approached with enthusiasm. "Stephanie! It's wonderful to see you. I still remember that campaign you developed before leaving to have the twins. It was revolutionary. Tell me, have you been keeping up with market changes?" And so, as if by magic, Stephanie was back in her element. She discussed marketing trends, shared amusing stories about her daughters, and charmed everyone with her wit and good humor. Groups formed around her, drawn to her magnetic energy, which she realized with surprise still existed beneath the layers of insecurity that had accumulated over the years. Eric watched the scene with a mix of conflicting emotions: shame for his actions, surprise at seeing how she was still admired, jealousy of the attention she received, and a strange pride he didn't want to admit. When he finally got a moment alone with her near the bar, his voice came out more defensive than he had planned. "Why didn't you warn me you were coming?" Stephanie took a sip of her lemon water before responding. "For the same reason you forgot to tell me that wives were welcome, I suppose." "It wasn't like that," he protested weakly. "Then how was it, Eric?" Her eyes challenged him. "Are you ashamed of me? Of this body that created your daughters? Of the woman who no longer fits your perfect pictures on social media?" His silence was answer enough. The pain in her eyes was so real that Eric had to look away. "I loved you so much." Her voice was almost a whisper. "I faced so much so we could have our family, and is this how you repay me?" "Stephanie, No," she interrupted him, keeping her dignity intact. "I don't want to hear excuses now. I will stay until the end of the party. I will smile and chat, because I deserve to be here as much as anyone. And afterwards we will go home in silence, because I really don't know what to say to a man who prefers to pretend I don't exist." The rest of the evening went as she had promised. She smiled, chatted, shone. She photographed herself with old colleagues, exchanged contacts, and promised visits she actually intended to fulfill this time. Eric stayed nearby, trying to participate in the conversations but feeling strangely out of place in his own environment. The journey back home was as silent as Stephanie had anticipated. She looked out the window, watching the city lights pass by like shooting stars, each one holding unfulfilled wishes and broken promises. In the days that followed, a distance was established between them. They communicated only about practical matters related to the children, with the cold politeness of strangers forced to share a space. Eric made some attempts to get closer, but they were met with an invisible barrier that he himself had built over the years. It was only when he found Stephanie silently crying in the closet, holding an old dress against her body, that Eric finally understood the depth of the damage he had caused. "I really believed," she said without looking at him, "that our love was stronger than any physical change, than any difficulty, that you saw me beyond appearance." Eric knelt before her, feeling tears burn in his own eyes. "I got lost," he confessed with a choked voice. "I got lost in an image that isn't real, in worries that don't matter. When I saw you at that party, shining as you always did, I realized how foolish I had been, how much I wasted." "Words are easy, Eric." "I know." He swallowed hard. "That's why I'm not going to ask you to trust me now. I just ask for the chance to prove day by day that I can be better, that I can be the man you deserve." It was a slow process. Eric began going to therapy, confronting his obsession with appearances and the insecurity that had led him to undervalue what truly mattered. He started spending more time with his daughters, organized dinners at home inviting friends they hadn't seen in so long, and created space for Stephanie to rediscover her own interests. They weren't grand gestures, but small daily proofs of a renewed commitment. When she decided to return to work part-time, it was he who reorganized his schedule to ensure that the girls always had one parent available. Over time, she began to occupy more space in her own life. He started encouraging her, bringing small joys to her daily routine: a walk together in the late afternoon, a dinner made by 4 hands, a sincere compliment that made her blush as in the old days. Without noticing, her gaze gained more sparkle, and her old dresses began to fit again, sliding over her body with the lightness she had forgotten she had. It wasn't just the weight that was melting away, but the discouragement that had once held her back. She was finding herself again, and he was finally beginning to see. Months later, on a typical Friday night while watching the twins perform an improvised play in the living room, Stephanie found Eric's hand on the sofa and intertwined her fingers with his, a small gesture that signaled a significant breakthrough. "We're still building something new," she said later, when they were alone on the porch under the stars. "But I'm starting to believe it might be even better than before." Eric gently squeezed her hand, feeling a deep gratitude for the second chance he didn't deserve, but was determined to honor. "You have always been the brightest star in my life," he murmured. "I'm sorry for letting my vision get blurred for so long." The path to complete reconciliation would still be long, but both had learned that true love is not in the perfection of appearances, but in the strength we find to grow together through imperfections, celebrating not only who we were but who we have become along the shared journey. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.